The crystal chandeliers of Aria, one of New York's most exclusive restaurants, weren't the only things sparkling with intensity that fateful evening. They say money can't buy happiness, but for the formidable Harrison Sterling, it bought power, influence, and a life of public adoration with his elegant wife, Catherine. But secrets like cracks in a flawless diamond were beginning to show. Tonight, a carefully constructed empire of lies is about to shatter. We're about to witness a wife's ultimate revenge, a husband's public downfall, and a mistress who gets more than she bargained for. What you are about to hear is a story of love betrayal, and the explosive moment one woman decided she had nothing left to lose. Catherine Sterling glided through her Upper East Side brownstone with the practiced ease of a woman born to its opulence. Every surface gleamed, every flower arrangement was a masterpiece, and the silence was broken only by the distant hum of Manhattan traffic and the soft click of her Louboutin heels on the marble floors. To the outside world, she was the epitome of grace and fortune, the perfect wife to the titan of private equity, Harrison Sterling. Their life was a carefully curated collection of galas, charity boards, and summers in the Hamptons. It was by all accounts a perfect life. But for months a chilling disquiet had settled deep within Catherine's soul. It started subtly. A late-night board meeting that stretched until 3 a.m. The scent of an unfamiliar, cloyingly sweet perfume on his suit jacket, Chanel No. 5, a scent she hadn't worn in years. The way Harrison, a man who once dissected every detail of her day with genuine interest, now offered a distracted, "That's nice, darling," his eyes glued to the phantom glow of his second phone, a device she wasn't supposed to know existed. Harrison was a master of his universe, a man whose charisma was as legendary as his business acumen. He had swept a young Catherine off her feet, a bright-eyed art history major who saw beyond the Sterling family fortune, and fell for the man who quoted Keats and promised her a world of adventure. He had delivered on that promise in a way. Their world was vast and glittering, but it had become a gilded cage, and she was its lonely ornamental bird. The first concrete crack in the facade appeared on a Tuesday. Harrison was supposedly in Chicago for a 24-hour whirlwind merger deal. Catherine was hosting a luncheon for the museum's acquisitions committee. As she was discussing the merits of a newly discovered Degas sketch, her phone buzzed with a notification from their shared credit card account, a charge from the Gilded Lily, a ridiculously expensive lingerie boutique in Soho. This was followed by another charge minutes later from the Hotel Elysian, a boutique hotel in the meatpacking district known for its discretion and decadence. Chicago, he had said. The lie was so blatant, so insulting in its carelessness, that the air was knocked from her lungs. The chatter of the committee faded into a dull roar. She excused herself, her smile a brittle mask, and locked herself in the powder room. Her reflection stared back, a woman she barely recognized. Her eyes, once vibrant, were clouded with a pain she had refused to acknowledge for far too long. That night she didn't sleep. The vast empty bed felt like a tomb. She thought back over their 20 years together. The early days filled with laughter and genuine affection. The birth of their 2 children, now away at boarding school, shielded from the creeping rot in their parents' marriage. She had sacrificed her own career ambitions, pouring her intellect and energy into being the perfect partner, the perfect hostess, the perfect mother, the perfect asset to the Sterling brand. And for what? To be discarded for someone younger? Someone who wore cheap perfume and frequented hotels that catered to illicit rendezvous. The humiliation was a physical ache, a hot, searing poker in her chest. But beneath the pain, a new emotion began to smolder: rage, cold, clear, and utterly consuming. Catherine was not a fool. She had been raised by a shrewd society matriarch who had always told her, "Hope for the best, my dear, but always be prepared for the worst, and never ever let them see you bleed." Catherine had bled in private for months. Now it was time to cauterize the wound. The next morning she did not confront Harrison when he returned feigning exhaustion from his trip. She kissed his cheek, the scent of his lie a bitter taste in her mouth, and listened patiently to his fabricated tales of boardroom battles. She played the part of the devoted wife perfectly, all while her mind was a whirlwind of calculations. She knew a quiet divorce was what he would expect, a discreet settlement, a non-disclosure agreement, and a joint statement about amicable parting. She would be neatly tucked away, another wealthy divorcee fading into obscurity, while he would continue his life unblemished with his new toy. No, not this time. He had not just broken their vows, he had humiliated her. He had taken her for a fool, assuming her silence was weakness, her grace apathy. He had underestimated her. It was a mistake he would come to regret publicly and profoundly. Her plan began to take shape not as a product of hysteria, but of cold, calculated fury. She would not just expose him, she would incinerate his carefully constructed world. And she would do it on the biggest stage imaginable, a place where the mighty and the influential gathered, a place where whispers traveled faster than stock market tips. She needed a name. Who was the woman who had so captivated her husband that he would risk everything? Harrison was a creature of habit, and his weakness was his ego. He wouldn't choose just anyone. He would choose someone who reflected well on him, someone impressive in her own right, at least on the surface. Catherine hired a private investigator, a discreet but ruthless man named Arthur Vance, recommended by a friend who had navigated her own messy divorce from a tech billionaire. Vance was expensive, but precision came at a price. Within 48 hours, he delivered a sleek black file. The name on the first page was Chloe Serafina Dubois. Catherine's blood ran cold. Chloe Dubois, the it girl of the tech world. A self-proclaimed visionary who had founded a successful if vapid lifestyle app called Elysian Fields, which curated bespoke experiences for the ultra-wealthy. She was 28 with raven hair, a surgically perfected pout, and a social media following in the millions. She was a regular on magazine covers, lauded as a trailblazer, a disruptor. The irony was sickening. The name of Chloe's app, Elysian Fields, was a nod to the very hotel where Harrison had taken her. It was a taunt, a secret joke shared between the two of them at Catherine's expense. The file was filled with images of them together laughing on a yacht in St. Bart's during a boys' fishing trip Harrison had supposedly taken, holding hands under a table at a dimly lit jazz club in Greenwich Village, kissing with a shocking intimacy in the reflection of a storefront window on Madison Avenue just blocks from their home. Each picture was a fresh stab of betrayal. This wasn't a fleeting sordid affair. It was a relationship, a parallel life he had been living. Chloe wasn't just a mistress. She was an heiress apparent to Catherine's throne. But Vance's report contained more than just photographs. It detailed Chloe's less than glamorous origins. Her real name was Kimberly Ann Higgins, from a rundown town in Ohio. Her seed money for the app was traced back to a series of shell corporations, all linked to a holding company owned by Sterling Industries. Harrison hadn't just been sleeping with her. He had built her. He had created his own replacement. This was the ultimate betrayal. He had used their shared fortune, the money Catherine had helped him build through years of social maneuvering and unwavering support, to create the very woman who would supplant her. Catherine closed the file, her hands steady. The grief was still there, a heavy stone in her heart. But the rage had crystallized into something sharp and diamond-hard. She now had the name, the evidence, and the motive. All she needed was the stage, and she knew just the one. The annual Starlight Gala, a lavish charity event for the city's children's hospital. It was the pinnacle of New York's social calendar, an event Catherine herself had chaired for the past 5 years. Harrison would be the guest of honor this year, receiving a humanitarian award for his unwavering commitment to family and community. The hypocrisy was so profound it was almost poetic. It was in 3 weeks. The guest list was a who's who of finance, politics, and media. Every major news outlet would have a presence on the red carpet. It was a place where reputations were made and, with the right catalyst, destroyed. Catherine looked at her reflection once more. The hurt was still visible in her eyes, but now there was something else, a glint of steel. The ornamental bird was about to show the world she had talons, and she was ready to use them. Harrison and his Elysian Fields creator were about to discover what happened when a woman with nothing left to lose decided to burn the gilded cage to the ground. The Starlight Gala wouldn't just be a night of charity, it would be a night of reckoning. The 3 weeks leading up to the Starlight Gala were a masterclass in deception. Catherine Sterling, to all outward appearances, became the most devoted wife in Manhattan. She laid out Harrison's favorite suits in the morning, feigned interest in his tedious stories of corporate takeovers, and even suggested a weekend getaway to their Connecticut estate, a place they hadn't visited together in years. This sudden resurgence of affection disarmed Harrison completely. He saw it as a sign of her capitulation, her acceptance of their new unspoken arrangement. He became more relaxed, more careless. He left his second phone, the Chloe phone, on his bedside table one night, assuming she was fast asleep. Catherine, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, waited until the sound of his deep, even breathing filled the room. She slipped out of bed, her movements as silent as a cat, and took the phone. Her hands trembled as she guessed the passcode. His ego, as always, was his undoing. It was the date his first major company went public, 1104. The phone unlocked. What she found was a gallery of their sordid little world. Intimate photos, screenshots of fawning articles about Chloe, and a text thread that stretched back nearly 2 years. Reading their messages was like drinking poison. Chloe. Stuck in a meeting with investors. So boring. Wish I was with you. Harrison. Soon, my love. Just have to get through a dinner with the ball and chain tonight. She's planning some charity thing. Utterly tedious. Chloe. She has no idea, does she, poor thing? Harrison. Completely oblivious. She lives in her own little world of flowers and art. It's for the best. Chloe. When are you going to tell her I want to be with you, Harry? Not just in secret. Harrison, patience, darling. The timing has to be perfect. After the gala. I'm getting that award and the press will be everywhere. I need to maintain the family man image for a little while longer. Then I'll handle it. A quiet exit for her, a grand entrance for you. The ball and chain. Poor thing. Completely oblivious. Each word was a nail hammered into the coffin of her love for him. He not only betrayed her, but also held her in utter contempt. He saw her as a prop, a stepping stone to his next conquest. And Chloe was no innocent caught in the thrall of a powerful man. She was a willing co-conspirator eagerly awaiting her coronation. Catherine meticulously forwarded the most damning texts and a few select photos to a secure email address she had created for this very purpose. Then she deleted her tracks and placed the phone back on the nightstand, her heart a block of ice. The last vestiges of her sentimentality had vanished. This was no longer just about a broken heart. It was about justice. Her next move was to secure her own future. She met with a new lawyer, a shark named Isabella Rossi, known for her scorched-earth tactics in high-stakes divorces. Not the family lawyer the Sterlings had used for decades, but a warrior who answered only to her. Catherine laid out the evidence she had gathered. Rossi's eyes, sharp and intelligent, widened almost imperceptibly as she reviewed the documents. Mr. Sterling has not only been unfaithful, Rossi said, her voice a low, dangerous purr, he has used marital assets, our assets, to fund his mistress's entire career. This isn't just infidelity, it's financial fraud. We can cripple him. They spent the next week quietly and efficiently moving Catherine's personal assets and setting up trusts for her children that were untouchable. They prepared the divorce, filing a document so explosive it would send shockwaves through Wall Street. But Catherine instructed Rossi to wait. Do not file it yet, Catherine commanded, a newfound authority in her voice. I'll tell you when. It has to be timed to the exact second. The final piece of her plan involved the gala itself. As the chairwoman, she had complete control over the seating arrangements. The main dais was reserved for the guests of honor and the highest-level donors. Harrison would be seated at the center, a king on his throne. Traditionally, his wife would be seated to his right, But Catherine had a different idea. She made a call to Chloe Dubois using her private unlisted number. "Chloe, this is Catherine Sterling." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line, followed by a flustered, "Oh, Catherine, what a surprise. I'm calling because I'm finalizing the seating for the Starlight Gala." Catherine said, her voice as smooth as silk. "Harrison has told me so much about you and your incredible work with Elysian Fields. He's so proud of what you've built. The lie was so sweet it could have caused cavities." Chloe, emboldened by what she perceived as Catherine's ignorance, preened. "Oh well, he's been an incredible mentor." "He has," Catherine agreed. "Which is why, as a personal thank you for all you've done to inspire him this year, I would be honored if you would sit with us at the head table, at Harrison's right hand." The bait was laid. Chloe's gasp was audible. To be seated at the main table next to the man of the hour with his wife's blessing. It was the ultimate social coup, a public declaration of her importance. It was everything she had been craving. I would be honored, Catherine." Chloe stammered, the triumph evident in her voice. "Thank you. That is so incredibly generous of you." "Not at all," Catherine replied, a chilling smile playing on her lips. "You deserve it. I'll have your place card made up immediately. I look forward to seeing you there." She hung up the phone, her hand steady. The trap was set. She had invited the fox into the henhouse, but the fox had no idea she was walking into an abattoir. The day of the gala arrived, a crisp, clear autumn evening. The city was electric with anticipation. Catherine spent the afternoon in a state of zen-like calm. She had a massage, had her hair styled in an elegant chignon, and chose her gown with the precision of a general choosing his armor. It was a custom Schiaparelli gown in a stunning shade of crimson, not the soft pastels she usually favored, but a bold, unapologetic red, the color of love, of rage, of blood. Around her neck she wore the Star of Sterling, a legendary 80-carat diamond necklace Harrison had given her on their 10th anniversary. Tonight it felt less like a gift of love and more like spoils of war she was claiming for herself. Harrison, oblivious, was ecstatic. He saw her striking appearance not as a warning but as a testament to his own success. "You look magnificent, darling," he boomed, adjusting his Tom Ford tuxedo. "Absolutely breathtaking. A perfect night for us." "For us," she repeated, her voice a soft echo. Her eyes met his in the mirror, and for a fleeting moment she saw a flicker of the man she had once loved. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by the self-satisfied gleam of a man who believed he had the world on a string. As they descended the grand staircase of their brownstone ready for the waiting limousine, Catherine's phone buzzed. It was a text from her lawyer, Isabella Rossi. "Ready when you are. Just say the word." Catherine typed a single word in reply: "Tonight." She took one last look at the life she was about to detonate. The portraits of their smiling children, the art she had so lovingly collected, the home that had been both her sanctuary and her prison. There was a pang of sorrow, but it was quickly eclipsed by a surge of adrenaline. She was no longer Catherine Sterling, the victim. She was Catherine, the architect of a reckoning. And the show was about to begin. Aria, the 3 Michelin-starred restaurant chosen for the Starlight Gala, was a symphony of understated opulence. Soaring ceilings, walls adorned with contemporary art, and tables draped in heavy cream linen set a stage for New York's elite. The air hummed with the murmur of powerful voices and the clinking of champagne flutes. Flashbulbs erupted in a continuous blinding storm on the red carpet outside, capturing the arrival of billionaires, senators, and celebrities. When Harrison and Catherine Sterling arrived, the frenzy intensified. Harrison, beaming, waved to the cameras, his arm possessively around his wife's waist. He was the man of the hour, the philanthropist king, and he played the part to perfection. Catherine smiled, a serene, enigmatic expression on her face. She was a vision in her crimson gown, the Star of Sterling necklace catching the light and fracturing it into 1,000 tiny rainbows. No one could have guessed that behind her placid demeanor was a heart beating with the ferocity of a war drum. They navigated the throng, exchanging pleasantries and air kisses. Catherine was gracious, charming, every inch the perfect society hostess. She saw familiar faces in the crowd, the Vanderbilts, the Rockefellers, titans of industry and old money. She also saw Savannah Guthrie from NBC, a clear sign of the evening's high profile. Everything was falling into place. As they approached the dais at the front of the grand ballroom, Catherine spotted her. Chloe Dubois. She was already seated, a smug, self-satisfied smile on her face. She wore a slinky silver gown that left little to the imagination, a stark contrast to Catherine's regal elegance. Her place card, just as promised, was to the right of Harrison's empty chair. She looked up as they approached, her eyes meeting Catherine's with a flash of triumphant condescension. It was the look of a victor claiming her prize. Harrison did a masterful, if subtle, double-take. He shot Catherine a questioning glance, his smile momentarily faltering. Catherine simply smiled back, a picture of innocence. "I thought it would be a lovely surprise," she whispered to him, "to honor your protégée. She's been such an inspiration to you." Harrison caught off guard, but ever the narcissist quickly recovered. His ego interpreted the gesture not as a trap, but as the ultimate confirmation of his power. He believed he had managed his affair so brilliantly that his wife was now in her own naive way celebrating his mistress. He felt invincible. He took his seat, placing himself between his wife and his lover. The symbolism was not lost on the few who were truly in the know, who exchanged discreet, knowing glances across the room. To the rest of the 500 guests, it was merely a slightly unusual seating arrangement. "Catherine, thank you again for this," Chloe purred, leaning across Harrison. "It's truly an honor." "The honor is all mine," Catherine replied, her voice dangerously sweet. "I believe in giving people exactly what they deserve." The dinner began. Course after course of exquisite food was served, but Catherine barely touched hers. She sipped her water, her senses on high alert, waiting for the perfect moment. The room was filled with chatter and laughter. Harrison was in his element, holding court, his voice booming as he regaled the table with an anecdote about his latest acquisition. He would occasionally place a hand on Catherine's arm, a performative gesture of affection for the crowd, and then moments later his knee would press against Chloe's under the table. Catherine felt it all, a silent observer of her own public humiliation. But her calm was absolute. A predator does not get flustered before it strikes. Finally, the moment arrived. The main course plates were cleared, and the chairman of the Children's Hospital, a portly, affable man named George Carmichael, stepped up to the podium. And now George began, his voice echoing through the silent ballroom. "It is my great honor to present this year's humanitarian award to a man whose generosity knows no bounds. A pillar of our community, a devoted family man, and a true titan of industry. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Harrison Sterling." The room erupted in applause. Harrison, his face flushed with pride, stood up and gave a theatrical bow. He kissed Catherine on the cheek, a dry, papery peck, and then, in a moment of supreme arrogance, he winked at Chloe. He strode to the podium, basking in the adoration of the crowd. He accepted the heavy crystal award and turned to the microphone. "Thank you, George, for that wonderful introduction," he began, his voice smooth and confident. "I am humbled, truly humbled to receive this award. But I cannot accept it alone. None of what I have achieved would be possible without the unwavering support, grace, and understanding of my incredible wife, Catherine." He paused, gesturing toward her. A spotlight found Catherine at the table. She smiled and gave a slight regal nod. The applause swelled again. "She is the rock upon which our family is built." Harrison continued, his voice thick with faux emotion. "Her dedication to our children and to the community is an inspiration to us all. Thank you, my love." He then launched into a 10-minute speech about corporate responsibility, community values, and the importance of family. It was a masterpiece of hypocrisy, and Catherine listened to every word, her resolve hardening with each syllable. As he finished, the room rose to its feet in a thunderous standing ovation. Harrison, holding the award aloft, was the king of the world. He returned to the table, his eyes shining, and placed the award on the table between himself and Catherine. "A beautiful speech, darling," Catherine said, her voice clear and carrying in the momentary lull as people retook their seats. "Thank you, my love," he said, preening. In fact, Catherine continued, her voice rising just enough to capture the attention of the surrounding tables. "It was so moving that I feel inspired to say a few words myself. A toast to my husband." A flicker of surprise, then pleasure, crossed Harrison's face. An impromptu toast from his adoring wife. It was the perfect unplanned cherry on top of his perfect night. He leaned back expansive and self-satisfied. "Well, this is a surprise." He chuckled. Catherine stood up gracefully. She was a striking figure in her red dress, the massive diamond necklace glittering under the spotlights. She picked up her water glass, her movements deliberate and poised. A hush fell over the ballroom as the guests, sensing an unscheduled event, turned their attention to the dais. "I'd like to propose a toast," Catherine began, her voice ringing out with crystalline clarity. "To my husband, Harrison Sterling, the man you just honored as a pillar of the community and a devoted family man." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. She smiled, but it was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was the smile of a hunter closing in on its prey. "Harrison is indeed a man of immense appetites." She continued, her gaze sweeping across the room before landing with laser-like precision on her husband. "He spoke of my unwavering support, my grace, and my understanding. And he is right. I have supported him. I have been graceful, and I have been far, far more understanding than any woman should ever have to be." The tone had shifted. The air in the room grew tense. Harrison's smile tightened at the edges. He started to make a move to stand to cut her off, but she held up a hand. "No, please, darling. Let me finish," she said, her voice dripping with irony. "You see, a humanitarian is someone who shows great concern for human welfare, and my husband has shown immense concern for the welfare of at least one person this year." She turned her head slowly, her eyes locking onto Chloe, whose own smile had now completely vanished, replaced by a look of dawning horror. "I'm speaking, of course, of the brilliant young entrepreneur Miss Chloe Dubois," Catherine announced. The spotlight operator, confused, but following the speaker, swung a secondary light to illuminate a pale, frozen Chloe. Gasps rippled through the ballroom. "Harrison has been more than a mentor to Miss Dubois," Catherine said, her voice now cold and sharp as broken glass. "He has been her benefactor in every sense of the word. He funded her company, Elysian Fields, a name I find particularly amusing, as it shares its name with the very hotel he frequents with Miss Dubois for their afternoon trysts." A collective audible gasp filled the room. Harrison leaped to his feet, his face a mask of fury and panic. "Catherine, that's enough. Sit down," he hissed, his voice a harsh, desperate whisper. But Catherine was immovable. She looked directly at him, her eyes burning with a righteous fire. "Sit down, Harrison. I have been sitting down for years. I have been sitting down while you lied to me, while you cheated on me, and while you used our money, my money, to build a life with your mistress. No, I don't think I'll sit down. In fact, I'm just getting started." She turned her attention back to the stunned, silent audience. "You honor this man for his commitment to family. Let me tell you about his commitment. It's a commitment to a second phone hidden from his wife. A commitment to telling me he's in Chicago on business when he's actually buying lingerie for his girlfriend in Soho. It's a commitment to texting that same girlfriend during our anniversary dinner, calling his wife the ball and chain." Every word was a perfectly aimed dart, finding its mark. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the frantic whispered exchanges of those at the outer tables, and the distant but now very audible sound of camera shutters clicking from the press section at the back. They smelled blood and they were closing in. "So, I would like to revise my toast," Catherine declared, raising her glass. "Not to Harrison Sterling, the humanitarian, but to Harrison Sterling, the liar and the cheat. And to Chloe Dubois, a woman so ambitious she built her career on her back and named her company after the hotel where she services my husband. May you both get everything you so richly deserve." She paused, then looked directly at Chloe, whose face was ashen. "And Chloe, a word of advice. When you accept a seat at another woman's table, make sure you haven't been sleeping in her husband's bed. It tends to cause a bit of, indigestion." With that, she took a delicate sip of her water. Then, in a final stunning act of defiance, she reached up, unclasped the 80-carat star of sterling necklace, and let it fall with a heavy, resonant clatter onto the table right next to Harrison's humanitarian award. "I believe this belongs to the marital assets, which my lawyer, Isabella Rossi, will be discussing with you shortly. She filed for divorce exactly 10 minutes ago. Consider this my official notice." She turned, and without a backward glance at the tableau of destruction she had created at her husband, frozen in apoplectic rage, and his mistress publicly shamed and humiliated, Catherine Sterling walked off the dais and down the center aisle of the ballroom. Her back was straight, her head held high. The crimson of her dress was a defiant banner. The room remained in a state of shocked silence, the guests like statues in a wax museum. As she reached the grand entrance, the silence was shattered by a cacophony of shouting reporters and the blinding, relentless flash of cameras. Catherine didn't flinch. She walked into the storm she had created, leaving the gilded cage and the man who had locked her in it to burn. The silence that followed Catherine's departure from the dais was a living entity, a thick, suffocating vacuum that sucked all the air from the grand ballroom of Aria. For a full 10 seconds, the 500 most powerful people in New York were frozen, a tableau of shock and disbelief. Then the spell shattered. A low murmur rippled through the room, quickly swelling into a cacophony of frantic whispers, gasps, and the undeniable vulturesque clicking of mobile phone cameras. Every guest had become a journalist, every phone a weapon aimed at the public execution unfolding before them. All eyes snapped back to the head table, a stage of utter devastation. Harrison Sterling stood trembling, his face a grotesque model of crimson and deathly white. The crystal humanitarian award on the table seemed to mock him, its facets reflecting the glittering ruin of his life. The star of sterling necklace lay beside it like a dead diamond-encrusted serpent. He opened his mouth, but only a strangled, guttural sound emerged. He looked like a man who had been shot, but hadn't yet had the sense to fall. His eyes, wide with panic and incandescent rage, were locked on the empty space where Catherine had just stood. But then the scene took a pivot so sharp it gave the entire room whiplash. It came from the woman who should have been the most humiliated, the most broken. Chloe Dubois, who had been ashen-faced and frozen just moments before, let out a sound. It began as a low chuckle, a tremor of dark amusement, and then it blossomed into a full-throated, almost unhinged laugh. The sound was so unexpected, so bizarrely triumphant, that a fresh wave of silence descended as people tried to process it. She wiped a tear of pure, cynical mirth from the corner of her eye with a steady hand. "Well," she announced, her voice carrying across the silent watching room, "that certainly had more flair than the dessert course." She rose from her chair with a liquid grace that belied the chaos around her. The spotlight, which had been abandoned on her pale face, now followed her as she moved. She was no longer a deer in the headlights. She was a panther seizing control of the hunt. She turned to Harrison, whose face had now slackened into stunned incomprehension. "Darling," she cooed, the endearment now a weapon of pure contempt. "You told me she was oblivious. You swore to me she was docile. A lovely, simple woman who arranged flowers and chaired committees. You failed to mention she possessed a spine of Valyrian steel and the strategic instincts of a 4-star general planning a coup." Harrison finally managed to form words, his voice a hoarse, desperate rasp. You think this is funny. She just destroyed me. She destroyed us." Chloe's smile was a slash of red against her pale skin. "Funny, no. I think it's pathetic," she retorted, her voice dropping to an icy, surgical tone. "I think you're pathetic. Did you really believe you were that brilliant that you could orchestrate this whole charade forever? keeping your perfect society wife in her gilded cage on the Upper East Side and your edgy tech genius mistress in her glass-walled penthouse downtown. You aren't a king, Harry. You're just a cliché with a bigger bank account. You're a man who thought his power made him immune to consequences. And tonight your ego wrote a check that your entire reputation can't begin to cash. She picked up a brioche roll from the breadbasket and with a flick of her wrist tossed it onto his Limoges china plate. It landed with a soft, pathetic thud. Game over. But she wasn't finished. She turned her attention to the captive audience, her gaze sweeping across the room like a searchlight. The guests, from billionaire hedge fund managers to society doyens, leaned in their faces a mixture of horror and rapt fascination. This was better than theater. "For the record," Chloe announced, her voice ringing with newfound authority, "and for all of your cameras, get a good angle, boys. Yes, I had an affair with this man. And yes, his money was the seed that grew Elysian fields. Let's have no illusions about that. But let's also not entertain the illusion that I am the only person in this room whose success is a direct result of Harrison Sterling's transactional brand of generosity." A new, more delicious kind of terror began to ripple through the room. This was no longer just about a marital spat. This was a threat of mutually assured destruction. Chloe pointed a long, perfectly manicured finger at George Carmichael, the portly hospital chairman who looked as if he was about to have a coronary. "Why don't you ask George over there about the very generous, very anonymous 7-figure donation the hospital received last spring? The one that arrived just a week before the city planning board on which George sits mysteriously overlooked a dozen zoning violations for Harrison's new community-focused condominium development downtown. The one that's displacing hundreds of low-income families." George turned a shade of purple that matched Harrison's earlier rage. Chloe's gaze then moved on, finding its next target. "Or perhaps we could ask the good Senator Thompson," she said, gesturing towards a silver-haired politician who was suddenly examining his dessert fork with intense interest. "Ask him about the Sterling Family Leadership Scholarship that both of his C-average sons miraculously received to Yale Law School last year. A remarkable achievement for two boys whose greatest accomplishment was learning to saber a bottle of champagne." She let that hang in the air for a moment, the implications clear and venomous. Harrison's philanthropy has always been an investment, a tool to buy silence, to purchase influence, to pave over his sins. I was just another one of his assets. The difference is, she added, her eyes flashing, I was an asset that was paying attention. With a final withering look at the utterly broken man at the table, Chloe Dubois grabbed her glittering Judith Lieber clutch. She didn't scurry away in shame. She sashayed off the dais and down the main aisle, her silver gown shimmering. She left behind a second, more complex crater of destruction, one that implicated the very power structure of the city. She hadn't just been a mistress. She had been an apprentice, taking meticulous notes on the corruption that fueled her lover's world. The drive back to the brownstone was surreal. Catherine sat in the back of the Maybach, the city lights smearing past the tinted windows. The adrenaline that had coursed through her veins, that had sharpened her words and straightened her spine, was beginning to recede, leaving behind a profound, hollow emptiness. There was no triumph, not yet, just the bone-deep weariness of a soldier after a long and brutal battle. Her phone, which she had ignored, began to buzz incessantly. She finally looked at it. The screen was a cascade of notifications. Texts from friends, some offering support, others demanding to know if it was true. Missed calls from her children's schools. And the news alerts. CNN Sterling gala explodes, billionaire's wife accuses him of adultery and public takedown. BBC News. Harrison Sterling's philanthropic empire in tatters. After wife's shocking revelations. The New York Times. A Gilded Age falls. Catherine Sterling rewrites the rules of divorce. A video was already viral. A shaky, zoomed-in clip of her speech filmed by a guest. She watched herself, a woman in a crimson dress, her voice steady, her face a mask of cold fury. She watched as she let the Star of Sterling necklace clatter onto the table. It felt like watching a stranger, a woman she had summoned from the depths of her pain and humiliation. A woman she wasn't sure she still recognized. The days that followed were a blur of media hysteria and strategic maneuvering. Harrison was crucified in the court of public opinion. His company's stock, Sterling Capital, dropped 30% in 2 days, wiping out billions in value. He was forced to issue a groveling public statement, which was promptly torn to shreds by commentators. He was a pariah. The men and women who had clamored for his attention a week ago now crossed the street to avoid him. He remained locked inside the Upper East Side brownstone, the very symbol of his success, now his luxurious prison. The staff reported sounds of shouting and breaking glass at night. Catherine, ensconced in the quiet, windswept seclusion of their East Hampton estate, became an icon. She was Catherine the Executioner, a symbol of righteous female rage. Feminist blogs wrote treatises on her speech. Support groups for divorced women hailed her as their queen. But Catherine felt none of it. She spent her days walking on the cold gray beach, speaking only to her children, reassuring them with a calm she did not feel, and to her lawyer, the formidable Isabella Rossi. Rossi was a shark circling bloodied waters. "He's hemorrhaging, Catherine," she said during one of their encrypted calls. "They're calling for a vote of no confidence from the board. His partners are trying to force him out. We have him on financial fraud for the funding of Chloe's company with marital assets. We're going to strip him bare." It was everything Catherine had wanted, and yet it felt strangely incomplete. The public humiliation, the financial ruin, it was punishment, yes, but it felt like pruning a diseased tree, not pulling it out by the roots. A week after the gala, a package arrived, delivered by a bonded courier who vanished as quickly as he appeared. It was a thick, cream-colored envelope of heavy cardstock. No return address. Her security detail had already scanned it. Inside, a single sheet of matching paper held a message written in a surprisingly elegant looping cursive. "Catherine, I imagine you have no desire ever to see my face again, and I cannot blame you. But I believe we have a powerful mutual interest that now transcends our personal history. There is more to the story of Harrison Sterling than you know. Far more. Things that go beyond infidelity and the creative reallocation of marital funds. Things that the district attorney's office would be very interested in. If you are willing to listen, meet me tomorrow at noon. The Picasso room on the 5th floor of the MoMA. It's usually quiet then. I'll be the one in black. Chloe." Catherine read the note 3 times. Her first visceral reaction was revulsion. Meet with Chloe Dubois. The woman who had laughed in her husband's bed, the co-conspirator in her own humiliation. She crumpled the note, ready to toss it into the fireplace. But she stopped. She smoothed the paper out, her eyes drawn back to one phrase. Things that the district attorney's office would be very interested in. A cold dread, familiar and long suppressed, crept up her spine. For 20 years she had lived alongside Harrison's ambition. She had seen the ruthlessness in his eyes when he closed a deal, the casual cruelty with which he discarded people who were no longer of use to him. She had always told herself it was just business. What if it wasn't? What if the foundation of their entire life, their fortune, their standing, was built on something far darker than just shrewd investing? Against the vehement, practically screaming advice of Isabella Rossi. "It's a trap, Catherine. She'll record you. She'll twist your words. Do not go." Catherine found herself being driven into the city the next day. She entered the MoMA through a private entrance arranged by a friend on the board. The Picasso room was hushed, the air cool and still. And there, standing before the jarring, fractured figures of Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, was Chloe. She was dressed in a severe but elegant black dress, her vibrant red lipstick gone, her hair pulled back in a simple knot. Without the usual armor of high fashion and defiant confidence, she looked younger, harder, and deeply weary. "Thank you for coming," Chloe said, her voice low. She didn't turn from the painting. "I'm not here for a debrief on your performance at the gala," Catherine said, her voice like ice. You have 60 seconds to tell me why I shouldn't have my lawyer file a restraining order against you. Chloe finally turned her dark eyes meeting Catherine's. There was no mockery in them now, only a grim seriousness. Because I'm the only person on earth besides Harrison who knows what really happened to Alexei Petrov. The name hit Catherine with the force of a physical blow. She actually stumbled back a step. Alexei Petrov, the Russian oligarch. A name from their past whispered in hushed tones. The silent partner in Harrison's first fund. The official story, the one Harrison had told for 15 years, was that Petrov had been a difficult and unstable partner, and they'd had a bitter falling out before Petrov tragically disappeared during a yachting trip in the Aegean Sea. A sudden storm, a man overboard. A terrible accident. Harrison didn't just part ways with him. Chloe said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, forcing Catherine to step closer. Petrov wanted out. The Russian economy was tanking and he wanted to liquidate his stake, a stake that by then had grown to nearly $500 million. Harrison didn't have that kind of liquidity. Paying out Petrov would have meant gutting sterling capital before it even became an empire. It would have exposed him as a fraud. Catherine felt the blood drain from her face. She leaned against the cool gallery wall, the jagged women in Picasso's masterpiece seeming to mock her own fractured reality. So Harrison arranged a final meeting. Chloe continued, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. He flew to Greece, met Petrov on his yacht, the Zephyr. He told everyone it was a last-ditch effort to convince him to stay in the fund. It was just the two of them who sailed out from the marina that afternoon. Harrison came back to shore alone, claiming they'd had a terrible fight and that Alexei had taken a tender to another island. Alexei Petrov was never seen again. His empty tender was found washed up on a rocky shore a week later. The Greek authorities ruled it a probable drowning. How could you possibly know this? Catherine whispered, her throat tight. Because Harrison is a narcissist, and narcissists need an audience, Chloe said with a bitter twist of her lips. He can't just be successful. He needs people to know how clever he is. One night a few months ago, we were at his private bar. He'd just closed that big telecom deal. He was drunk on power and a 50-year-old Macallan, and he told me. He confessed. He bragged about it. He called it the ultimate hostile takeover. He didn't just build his empire on your family's money and my body, Catherine. He built its very foundation on a man's murder. The final horrifying piece of the puzzle slid into place. Harrison's paranoia. The secret offshore accounts. The extreme obsessive need for control. It wasn't about hiding an affair. It was about hiding a capital crime. He kept proof, Chloe said, leaning in closer. He's too arrogant not to. A ledger. Not financial, but a personal one. Detailing his transactions with Petrov, the transfers, the setup. It's encrypted, but I know the password. It's the date his own father died, the day he inherited the money that he used to lure Petrov in. The man is a psychopath, but a sentimental one. Chloe looked directly at Catherine, and in that moment the chasm of their mutual hatred was bridged by a singular, terrifying understanding. They were two different women from two different worlds, but they had both been profoundly deceived by the same monster. The ledger is in a hidden safe behind the Francisco Goya painting in his home office, Chloe stated. The one of Saturn devouring his son. The grotesque perfection of it all, the black humor poetry, made Catherine feel nauseous. I gave you the public spectacle you deserved, Chloe said, her voice regaining a sliver of its old strength. I put the first bullet in him. Now you can deliver the kill shot. You can give the authorities the one thing they need to put him in a cage for the rest of his life. You have access to that house. I never will again. This was the final crossroad. A choice beyond money, beyond divorce, beyond revenge. This was a choice about justice. She could take the hundreds of millions she would get in the divorce and disappear, leaving Harrison a broken, disgraced man. Or she could risk everything to unearth a truth that would not just ruin him, but entomb him. Catherine looked from Chloe's hard, expectant face to the fractured women in the painting. They were brutalized, misshapen, but they were staring back defiant. She would not just escape the gilded cage. She would melt it down and forge it into a weapon. She gave a single sharp nod to Chloe Dubois. Not of forgiveness, but of alliance. The real drama had only just begun. And that's where our story leaves Catherine Sterling on the precipice of a choice that will redefine her life once more. She started as a wife betrayed, transformed into a woman seeking public revenge, and now stands as a potential harbinger of ultimate justice. What would you do in her shoes? Would you walk away with your fortune and freedom, or would you pursue the darker path to ensure a monster faces his final reckoning? This tale of love, lies, and high-stakes revenge shows just how fragile the most glittering lives can be, and the extraordinary lengths people will go to when they've been pushed too far. If you were captivated by the drama and twists of the Sterling saga, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with someone who loves a story of epic revenge, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that are stranger than fiction. Let us know in the comments what you think Catherine should do next. Have you ever seen a life shatter in an instant? Picture this. Isabella Montgomery, 6 months pregnant and radiating joy, sits at a lavish dinner table. Her husband, billionaire industrialist Ethan Montgomery, is across from her, his hand resting on hers. Their life seems perfect. Then his phone buzzes. He whispers a hurried apology, something about a sudden business emergency. He kisses her cheek, promises to be back soon, and walks out. But he wasn't heading to a boardroom. He was heading to a private jet. His mistress was already on board. The next morning, Isabella wouldn't be waking up to his return. She'd be waking up to her face pregnant and betrayed plastered across every major news channel in the country. This isn't just a story of infidelity. It's a story of how a woman's perfect world became a public spectacle, and how she fought back from the ashes. The crystal glasses at La Perle shimmered, catching the light from the chandeliers and fracturing it into 1,000 tiny rainbows on the pristine white tablecloth. It was the kind of light that made everything and everyone look flawless. From across the table, Isabella Montgomery watched her husband Ethan and felt a familiar, comforting warmth spread through her chest. He was captivating even after 5 years of marriage. His dark hair was styled with a casual precision. His jawline was sharp, and the custom-tailored Tom Ford suit he wore did little to hide the powerful physique beneath. He was talking to the Hendersons, a couple whose net worth hovered near the 10-digit mark, about market fluctuations and emerging tech. He spoke with an easy authority that drew people in, making them feel like they were part of his orbit, the center of his universe. For 5 years, Isabella had been the sun in that universe. Now, another was rising. Their life was a meticulously curated masterpiece. Their penthouse on Park Avenue offered sweeping views of Central Park, a sea of green and gray that Ethan had conquered. Their weekends were spent at their sprawling estate in the Hamptons, or on spontaneous trips to St. Bart's. They were the golden couple, the envy of their social circle, their pictures frequently gracing the pages of Vogue and Town & Country. And now the masterpiece was about to be complete. Isabella was 6 months pregnant with their first child, a son. She rested a hand on the gentle curve of her stomach, a secret smile playing on her lips. She had everything a woman could ever want. Or so she told herself. Lately, however, a discordant note had crept into their perfect symphony. It was subtle at first. Late-night meetings that stretched into the early hours. The scent of an unfamiliar perfume, faint and floral, clinging to his jacket. A new passcode on his phone, which was now perpetually face down on his nightstand. When she'd gently questioned him, he'd laughed it off, his deep voice smooth as velvet. Sweetheart, Montgomery Industries is closing the biggest merger of its history. It's all-consuming. Just a few more weeks, I promise. Then it's just you and me and our little guy. He would kiss her, then a deep, possessive kiss that was meant to reassure, but lately only served to smother her rising unease. He called her paranoid lovingly, of course, and blamed it on pregnancy hormones. She had almost started to believe him. Almost. Isabella, darling, you're glowing. Patricia Henderson exclaimed, her voice pulling Isabella from her thoughts. Patricia's face was a testament to the finest cosmetic surgeons in Manhattan, smooth and largely immobile. Pregnancy certainly agrees with you. Isabella offered a genuine smile, the baby kicking softly as if in agreement. Thank you, Patricia. We're very excited. Ethan reached across the table, his large, warm hand covering hers. His thumb stroked her knuckles. It was a practiced gesture, one he'd performed 1,000 times. Publicly, he was the doting husband, the adoring father-to-be. I'm the luckiest man alive, he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he smiled at her. The smile didn't quite reach his eyes. It was a performer's smile, and Isabella, his most devoted audience, was starting to see the artifice. The conversation flowed around them, a river of talk about charity galas, art auctions, and the nightmare of summer traffic to the Hamptons. Isabella played her part, nodding, smiling, asking the right questions. But her focus was a tight knot in her stomach. Ethan's phone, resting on the table beside his plate, had been silent all evening. It was a new phone she'd noticed a week ago, a sleek, unfamiliar model. His old one, he'd claimed, had fried itself. As the waiters cleared their main course plates, it happened. A soft buzz. Not a ring, but a low, insistent vibration against the polished wood of the table. Every head turned. In their world, a phone call interrupting a dinner at La Pearl was a minor sacrilege. Ethan's eyes flickered to the screen. For a fraction of a second, his mask slipped, a flash of irritation quickly replaced by something else, something that looked suspiciously like anticipation. He picked up the phone, glancing at the screen. Isabella watched his thumb hover over the decline icon. He was going to ignore it, she thought with a surge of relief. He was going to choose them, this dinner, this moment. He didn't. His thumb slid the other way. He brought the phone to his ear, his back straightening. "Excuse me," he murmured to the table, his voice a low, urgent hum. "I have to take this." He stood up, tall and imposing, and walked away from the table, weaving through the maze of waiters and diners toward the restaurant's opulent lobby. Isabella's gaze followed him, a cold dread washing over her. It wasn't a business call. She knew it. The way he had looked at the phone, the guarded urgency in his posture, it was personal, intimate. Patricia Henderson gave a delicate, theatrical sigh. The curse of a powerful man. The work never stops. Her husband, a portly man named Robert, grunted in agreement. But Isabella knew better. This wasn't work. She could feel it in her bones, in the sudden stillness of the baby in her womb. A premonition, cold and sharp as a shard of ice, pierced the warm bubble of her denial. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The dessert menus were offered and politely declined. The Hendersons were starting to look restless. Isabella's smile felt frozen on her face. She kept glancing toward the lobby, expecting, praying to see him returning, an apologetic look on his face. Finally he reappeared. But he wasn't walking back to their table. He was walking toward the exit, a valet holding the door open for him. He caught her eye from across the room. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head, a gesture of apology that felt more like a dismissal. Then he raised his phone to his ear again and was gone, swallowed by the New York night. The silence at the table was deafening. Robert Henderson cleared his throat awkwardly. Patricia patted Isabella's hand, her sympathy as manufactured as her cheekbones. "My dear, don't you worry. I'm sure it's a terrible crisis at the office." Isabella felt a strange calm descend upon her. The knot of anxiety in her stomach had dissolved, replaced by a hollow certainty. She slowly folded her napkin, placing it beside her untouched plate. "Yes," she said, her voice steady, betraying none of the chaos erupting within her. "I'm sure it is." She allowed Robert to handle the bill, graciously accepted their offers to see her home, and lied, saying her driver was waiting just outside. She needed to be alone. As she stepped out of the restaurant's gilded doors and into the cool night air, the city lights seemed to mock her. Each glittering skyscraper was a monument to the world Ethan had built, a world in which she was now a foreigner. She hailed a cab, the yellow car a beacon in the blur of her unshed tears. As it pulled away from the curb, she saw it Ethan's town car, a sleek black Maybach, was still parked where the valet had left it. He hadn't taken his own car. The driver had asked for a destination. "Just drive," she whispered, her hand protectively covering her belly. The baby was hers. This child, this tiny innocent life, was hers alone. The certainty of it was the only solid thing in a world that had just crumbled into dust. She didn't know where Ethan had gone, but she knew with a chilling finality that he hadn't gone to a meeting. And he wouldn't be coming home. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. The first crack in the gilded cage had appeared, and it was threatening to bring the whole glittering structure down around her. The penthouse felt cavernous and cold when Isabella finally let herself in. The floor-to-ceiling windows, which usually offered a breathtaking panorama of the city's electric heartbeat, now seemed like giant judging eyes looking in on her hollow life. The silence was absolute, broken only by the soft click of the lock and the distant mournful wail of a siren. She had walked these marble floors thousands of times, but tonight they felt alien, the opulent furniture like museum pieces from a life that was no longer hers. She went through the motions of her nightly routine, a robot programmed for a life that had been a lie. She changed into a silk nightgown, washed her face, and brushed her teeth, staring at her reflection in the vast mirror of their ensuite bathroom. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and a pain so deep it hadn't yet found an exit in the form of tears. She looked at the swell of her stomach, the gentle mound that held all her hopes and dreams. A wave of nausea, sharp and acidic, rose in her throat. Was he thinking of them? Of her? Of his son? Sleep was a distant country she couldn't reach. She lay in their king-sized bed, the space beside her feeling like a desolate, empty continent. The sheets still held the faint masculine scent of his cologne, a cruel reminder of his presence, his absence. At 2 a.m. she gave up. Her mind was a racetrack of horrifying possibilities. Had there been an accident, a medical emergency? But the calm, dismissive way he had left the fact he hadn't taken his own car. No, this was something else. This was a choice. Her unease finally coalesced into a single burning point of focus: his study. It was his sanctuary, the one room she rarely entered. A masculine domain of dark wood leather and the smell of old books and expensive whiskey. He had always been fiercely private about it. Now his privacy felt like a locked door she had to break down. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she pushed open the heavy oak door. The room was dark save for the glow of the city filtering through the window. She didn't turn on the lights. She felt her way to his large mahogany desk, her fingers tracing its polished surface until they found his laptop. It was closed. She opened it. The screen lit up asking for a password. She tried her birthday. Access denied. His birthday. Access denied. Their anniversary. Access denied. Frustration and despair warred within her. She was about to give up when her eyes fell on a small framed photo on the corner of the desk. It was a picture of them from their honeymoon in Santorini, both of them tanned, young, and impossibly happy. Tucked just behind the frame was a small, yellow sticky note. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. On it, in his familiar bold handwriting, was a single word: Odyssey. Her breath hitched. The Odyssey. It was the book he was reading when they first met, a leather-bound copy he carried everywhere. It was their inside joke. He was Odysseus the epic traveler, and she was his Penelope waiting faithfully for him to come home. The irony was a physical blow. She typed the word. Access granted. The screen opened to his desktop, a clean, organized interface. For a moment she felt a pang of guilt. This was a violation, a trespass of the highest order. But the image of him walking out of the restaurant, abandoning her pregnant and alone, burned away her hesitation. She had a right to know. She didn't know what she was looking for. His emails, his documents. Her eyes scanned the icons until they landed on one that made her blood run cold. It was a cloud storage application, one she didn't recognize. The icon was a sleek silver S. She clicked on it. It opened without a password already logged in. The interface was a grid of photo albums. The titles were innocuous. Project Nightingale, Geneva Presentation, Maldives Proposal. Her hand shook as she moved the cursor over the last one. Maldives Proposal. He had told her it was a pitch for a new sustainable resort. He had been working on it for weeks, he'd said. The cause of so many of his late nights. She clicked. The album opened and Isabella forgot how to breathe. The air was stolen from her lungs, leaving a vacuum of pure shock. It wasn't a proposal. It was a vacation. A very recent one. The first photo was of a woman. She was stunningly beautiful with long, sun-bleached blonde hair, a deep, even tan, and a smile that was both innocent and predatory. She was standing on the deck of a yacht, the turquoise water of the Maldives a brilliant backdrop. She was wearing a tiny white bikini that left little to the imagination. In the next photo, she was laughing, her head thrown back as Ethan sprayed her with champagne. He looked relaxed, happy, utterly captivated. A kind of happy she hadn't seen in years. Isabella clicked through the photos, each one a fresh stab to her heart. Ethan and the woman whose name she saw from a file name was Chloe Sterling, dining on a private beach, their faces illuminated by candlelight. Chloe wrapped in one of Ethan's dress shirts, making breakfast in the kitchen of a luxurious overwater bungalow. Ethan and Chloe asleep on a hammock, his arm thrown protectively over her bare stomach. And then the final picture, the one that shattered the last vestiges of Isabella's composure. It was a close-up shot. Chloe was holding up her left hand to the camera. On her ring finger was a diamond, a magnificent cushion-cut diamond that dwarfed the one Ethan had given Isabella. It was an engagement ring. And behind her, out of focus but unmistakable, was Ethan smiling. The photo was dated 2 weeks ago, during the time he was supposedly pulling all-nighters for the merger. A raw guttural sob was torn from Isabella's throat. It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't a fling. It was a whole other life. A life he had been building while she was at home, naively picking out paint colors for a nursery. The Maldives proposal wasn't for a resort. It was for a new wife. She slammed the laptop shut, the crack of plastic echoing in the silent room. The betrayal was so immense, so audacious, it was almost incomprehensible. He hadn't just cheated on her. He had replaced her. He was building a new life on the foundations of their old one, and she was just collateral damage, a problem to be managed. The phone call at the restaurant. It hadn't been a crisis. It had been a summons. Chloe was waiting. Their real life was calling, and he had answered, leaving his pregnant wife at the dinner table without a second thought. The sudden business emergency was a flight not to a meeting but to a romantic getaway. St. Moritz, perhaps, or a private island only he knew of. The tears came then, hot and furious. She stumbled back from the desk, her body racked with violent sobs. She sank to the floor, her hands protectively clutching her belly as if she could shield her unborn son from the poison of his father's deceit. The gilded cage had not just cracked, it had been blown apart, and she was in free fall with no safety net in sight. The name Chloe Sterling was seared into her brain, a brand marking the end of everything she had ever known. And in the dark, cavernous penthouse, surrounded by the trappings of a life that was a lie, Isabella Montgomery finally understood the chilling truth: she was utterly, terrifyingly alone. Isabella didn't sleep. The night was a blur of tears, rage, and a hollowing grief that felt bottomless. She alternated between pacing the vast expanse of the penthouse like a caged animal and curling into a ball on the cold bathroom floor, her hand never leaving her stomach. Every time she closed her eyes, the images assaulted her: Ethan's carefree smile on the yacht, Chloe's triumphant face, the blinding sparkle of that diamond ring. He had proposed to another woman while his wife was carrying his child. The sheer calculated cruelty of it was a physical weight pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. Dawn broke over the city, painting the sky in soft shades of rose and gray. It felt like an intrusion, a violation of her private agony. The world was waking up, oblivious to the fact that hers had ended. Exhaustion finally claimed her, and she fell into a fitful, dream-haunted sleep on the living room sofa, still wrapped in her silk nightgown. She was jolted awake a few hours later by the insistent, shrill ringing of her phone. She fumbled for it on the coffee table, her mind still thick with a sleep-deprived fog. The screen showed her mother's name. She let it go to voicemail. A second later it rang again. Her sister, then her best friend Amelia, then a number she didn't recognize, and another. The phone buzzed and chimed relentlessly, a frantic electronic swarm. A knot of pure dread tightened in her stomach. This wasn't just friends and family checking in. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. With a trembling hand, she finally answered the call from Amelia. "Izzy! Oh my God, Izzy, are you okay? Are you watching the news?" "Don't watch the news." Amelia's voice was frantic, pitched high with panic. The warning, of course, had the opposite effect. What news, Amelia? What's going on? Just don't turn on the TV. I'm coming over. I'm in a cab. I'll be there in 10 minutes. But Isabella couldn't wait. The dread was now a full-blown terror. She hung up, her fingers numb as she fumbled for the television remote. The giant screen on the wall flickered to life. She didn't have to change the channel. It was on every single one. GNN, MSNBC, Fox News. They were all running the same story. And there on the screen was her life. Or rather, the smoldering wreckage of it. The headline was stark and brutal, emblazoned across the bottom of the screen in a bold yellow font. Billionaire Ethan Montgomery abandons pregnant wife for socialite Chloe Sterling. Her own face stared back at her. It was a recent photo from a charity gala, her hand resting on her pregnant belly, a joyful, unsuspecting smile on her face. Beside it was a photo of Ethan looking handsome and powerful, and next to his a picture of Chloe Sterling looking smug and radiant, snapped at an airport. She was climbing the steps of a private jet, a Gucci travel bag slung over her shoulder. The location stamp on the news graphic read, "Teterboro Airport last night." A female news anchor was speaking in a grave, serious tone. "We are getting shocking reports this morning about industrialist tycoon Ethan Montgomery. Sources confirm that Montgomery, fifth on the Forbes list of youngest billionaires, left a dinner with his wife of 5 years, Isabella Montgomery, last night to rendezvous with his mistress, social media influencer and heiress Chloe Sterling." The screen split, showing paparazzi footage. It was blurry shot from a distance but unmistakable. It was Ethan last night getting out of a black SUV at Teterboro Airport. He was on the phone, the same phone he had taken the call on at the restaurant. He looked agitated, glancing around before hurrying up the steps of the Gulfstream G650. The tail number was clearly visible. His jet. The couple? The anchor continued, her voice dripping with manufactured sympathy. Then departed for an undisclosed location believed to be a private island in the Caribbean. The story takes a particularly heartbreaking turn as sources close to the couple have confirmed that Isabella Montgomery is 6 months pregnant with their first child. Isabella felt the blood drain from her face. She sank back onto the sofa, her hand flying to her mouth. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. It was a nightmare. Her private humiliation, her deepest pain, was being broadcast to millions. It was a spectator sport. The report continued, relentless and invasive. A relationship expert was brought on via video link to analyze the psychology of the billionaire mindset. A gossip columnist recounted rumors of Ethan and Chloe being spotted together in Monaco and London over the past few months, rumors Isabella had never heard. They showed pictures from Chloe Sterling's Instagram, a carefully curated feed of luxury travel designer clothes and sponsored posts. They even had a statement from a friend of Chloe's. "Chloe is a wonderful person," a young woman with expertly applied makeup said to a reporter. "She and Ethan are deeply in love. It's unfortunate about the circumstances, but you can't help who you fall in love with. Ethan wasn't happy in his marriage. He was planning on leaving her." The words hit Isabella like a physical assault. He was planning on leaving her. The lie was so blatant, so cruel, it stole the air from her lungs. He hadn't been planning anything. He had been living a double life, and she, his pregnant wife, was being painted as the obstacle to his true happiness. The final blow came when the anchor with a somber look said, "We have an exclusive statement from Montgomery Industries' PR department." A sterile corporate message flashed on the screen. "This is a private matter for the Montgomery family. We ask that you respect their privacy during this difficult time. Mr. Montgomery remains fully committed to his duties as CEO of Montgomery Industries." Privacy. They asked for privacy after her life had been dissected on national television. It was a joke. A sick, twisted joke. The statement wasn't for her. It was for the shareholders. It was damage control. She wasn't Isabella Montgomery, a grieving pregnant wife. She was a potential liability to the company's stock price. She turned off the television, plunging the room back into silence. But the images were burned onto the inside of her eyelids. Her face pregnant and smiling. Chloe's face triumphant and beautiful. Ethan's face captured in a moment of betrayal. The whole world had seen it. Her colleagues, her friends, her family, strangers on the street. They were all looking at her, pitying her, judging her. The golden girl had fallen, and her fall was a public spectacle. The intercom buzzed and the doorman announced Amelia's arrival. When Isabella opened the door, Amelia rushed in her face, a mask of worry. She wrapped Isabella in a tight hug, and it was only then that Isabella's body remembered how to function. The shock receded, and a tidal wave of pure, unadulterated rage surged through her. "He'll pay for this, Izzy," Amelia whispered, fiercely stroking her hair. "I swear to God we'll make him pay for this." Isabella pulled back, her eyes dry and burning. The tears were gone, replaced by a cold, hard fire. She looked past Amelia at the windows overlooking the city Ethan thought he owned. He had tried to erase her, to dismiss her as a chapter he was closing. He had made her a public victim, a footnote in his love story with Chloe Sterling. "No," Isabella said, her voice low and dangerously calm. "He won't just pay. He'll regret the day he ever thought he could discard me." In the heart of her public humiliation, a new resolve was forged. She wasn't just a pregnant wife. She wasn't just a victim on the news. She was Isabella Montgomery. And she was about to show her husband and the world what that really meant. The spectacle wasn't over. She was about to become the main event. The days that followed the news report were a suffocating fog. Isabella's penthouse, once a symbol of success, became a luxurious prison. Outside, a pack of paparazzi had set up camp, their long-lensed cameras aimed at her windows like sniper rifles, waiting for a shot of the grieving wife. Every delivery, every visitor was documented with a frenzy of clicking shutters. Her face, juxtaposed with Chloe's, was on the cover of every tabloid at the checkout counter. The headlines screaming variations of "Billionaire's Betrayal" and "From Penthouse to Pain." Her phone was a source of constant torment. Voicemails piled up, a cacophony of pity, morbid curiosity, and unwanted advice. Her mother cried. Her father, a stoic man of few words, promised to ruin Ethan, a threat that was both touching and utterly futile against the Montgomery empire. Ethan's own parents, the formidable senior Montgomerys, had sent a curt formal email expressing their disappointment and assuring her that their family's lawyers would be in touch to handle the transition smoothly. It was clear where their loyalties lay with their son and the preservation of the family brand. Amelia became her gatekeeper, her shield. She moved into one of the guest suites, fielding calls, managing the household staff who walked around with downcast, sympathetic eyes, and ensuring Isabella ate. Most meals, however, Isabella just pushed around her plate, the thought of food making her stomach churn. The only thing that mattered was the tiny life inside her. For him, she drank the nutrient shakes Amelia prepared. For him, she forced herself to breathe. Ethan himself was a ghost. There was no call, no text, no email. Just a deafening, calculated silence. He had vanished from her life as completely as if he had never existed. His only presence, the lingering scent in his closet, and the brutal headlines that bore his name. His lawyers, however, were not silent. A crisp, impersonal letter arrived via courier informing her that Mr. Montgomery had filed for divorce on the grounds of irreconcilable differences. It also informed her that he was prepared to offer a generous settlement, the details of which would be forthcoming contingent on her signing a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. She read the letter in the sterile quiet of her living room, the city lights beginning to twinkle outside. A generous settlement. An NDA. He wanted to buy her silence, to package her pain into a neat financial transaction so he could move on unencumbered to his new life with Chloe. He was treating her like a fired employee, not the woman who had shared his bed for 5 years, the mother of his unborn child. That night, something inside her shifted. The grief, while still a raw, open wound, was momentarily eclipsed by a white-hot fury. She had spent days marinating in victimhood, drowning in the public's pity. She had allowed him to define her as the abandoned pregnant wife. No more. The next morning she woke with a purpose. She showered and dressed not in the silk pajamas she'd been living in, but in a smart black dress, a string of her grandmother's pearls around her neck. She looked at her reflection. The pallor was still there, the dark circles under her eyes, but there was a new light in their depths. A glint of steel. "Amelia," she said, her voice clear and firm. "I need you to get me a name. Not just a good divorce lawyer. I want the best. I want a shark. The kind of lawyer that makes men like Ethan Montgomery wake up in a cold sweat." Amelia, who was arranging a bouquet of sympathy lilies with a grimace, looked up, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Now you're talking, Izzy. I know just the person." The name Amelia gave her was Annalise Reed. She wasn't just a lawyer. She was a legend in the rarefied world of high-stakes divorces. Known for her razor-sharp intellect, her take-no-prisoners approach, and her astronomical fees, she was the go-to attorney for jilted wives of the 1%. She didn't just win settlements, she dismantled empires. Getting a meeting was an ordeal in itself, a testament to her exclusivity. But the name Isabella Montgomery carried its own weight, and the very public nature of her situation was exactly the kind of high-profile case Annalise excelled at. A video consultation was scheduled for the following afternoon. Isabella spent the intervening hours preparing. She gathered her thoughts, her memories, every lie Ethan had told her, every broken promise. She printed out the photos from his secret cloud album, the images of him and Chloe in the Maldives. She laid them out on the dining room table, a mosaic of his betrayal. Looking at them no longer made her want to cry. It made her want to fight. When the call connected, Annalise Reed appeared on the screen. She was an impeccably dressed woman in her late 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through the screen. She didn't offer condolences or sympathy. She got straight to the point. "Mrs. Montgomery," she began, her voice crisp and businesslike, "I've reviewed the preliminary information. Your husband is represented by Sterling Cromwell and Finch, a formidable firm, but their primary focus is corporate law. They're out of their depth. This is a good thing." Isabella felt a flicker of hope. "He's offered me a settlement, in exchange for an NDA." Annalise gave a short, sharp laugh. "Of course he has. Let me be clear, Mrs. Montgomery. We will not be signing an NDA. Not now, not ever. Your story is your most valuable asset. He made it public. We're going to use that. The narrative right now is that you are a victim. We are going to change that narrative. You are not a victim. You are a mother protecting her child's future." Annalise's confidence was a balm on Isabella's frayed nerves. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she wasn't alone in the fight. His statement, Annalise continued, mentioned irreconcilable differences. That's a no-fault term. We, however, will be filing on the grounds of adultery. We will be naming Chloe Sterling in the filing. We will subpoena him, their travel records, their credit card statements. We will make this so public, so messy, that the Montgomery Industries Board of Directors will start to see him not as a brilliant CEO, but as a reckless liability. Isabella listened, captivated. Annalise was outlining a war, and she was handing Isabella the battle plan. Now, Annalise said, her gaze intensifying. Tell me everything. Don't leave out a single detail, no matter how small or painful. Every late night, every suspicious text, every whispered phone call. This is not about emotions anymore, Mrs. Montgomery. This is about ammunition. And so Isabella talked. She talked for over an hour, her voice growing stronger and more confident with every word. She told Annalise about the dinner, the phone call, the discovery on his laptop. She spoke of the life he had promised her, and the secret one he had been living. As she laid bare the anatomy of his betrayal, she felt a profound sense of release. The shame was lifting, replaced by a cold, clear-eyed resolve. When she was finished, Annalise nodded slowly. Good. This is very good. He's arrogant. He underestimated you. That is his weakness, and that is what we will exploit. After the call ended, Isabella walked over to the window. The paparazzi were still there, a patient pack of wolves, but they no longer looked like a threat. They looked like an audience. Ethan had wanted a quiet, tidy exit. He had made a spectacle of her, thinking it would break her. He was about to find out he hadn't created a victim. He had created an adversary. And she, with Annalise Reed by her side, was just beginning to fight back. A glimmer of strength born in the ashes of her public humiliation was igniting into a flame. The weeks that followed the hiring of Annalise Reed marked a tectonic shift in Isabella's existence. The fog of grief began to burn away, replaced by the stark clarity of strategy. Annalise's first move was a masterpiece of legal aggression. She filed a countersuit against Ethan for divorce on the grounds of flagrant adultery, and in a move that sent shockwaves through Manhattan's elite social circles, she named Chloe Sterling as a co-respondent. The filing wasn't just a legal document, it was a press release. Annalise ensured it was leaked to the same news outlets that had reported Isabella's humiliation. The narrative began to pivot. The headlines shifted from "Billionaire's Betrayal" to "Pregnant Wife Fights Back." Paparazzi shots of Isabella, which previously sought a broken, weeping woman, now captured her entering Annalise's formidable office building. Her head held high, her hand resting on her stomach, not in vulnerability, but in a gesture of maternal defiance. She was no longer just the victim. She was becoming the protagonist of her own story. Annalise's team was a whirlwind of efficiency. They were forensic accountants, private investigators, and legal prodigies who moved with the swift, silent precision of a special ops team. While Ethan's corporate lawyers were accustomed to boardroom negotiations, Annalise's team specialized in unearthing personal and financial skeletons. A man like Ethan Montgomery, Annalise explained during one of their strategy sessions in her sleek, minimalist office, believes his wealth is a fortress. We're not going to attack the fortress head-on. We're going to find the secret tunnels he's dug underneath it. The first tunnel they unearthed was financial. While the world saw Ethan as a self-made industrialist, Annalise's forensic accountants, a notoriously dogged pair of brothers named Marco and Julian Vance, discovered a complex web of offshore accounts and shell corporations. It wasn't just about hiding money from the IRS. It was about hiding it from Isabella. Millions of dollars of marital assets, money that was legally half hers, had been systematically siphoned off over the past 2 years, funneled into untraceable accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland. He wasn't just planning to leave you, Isabella, Annalise said, pointing to a complex flow chart on a large screen. He was planning to leave you with next to nothing. The generous settlement he offered, it was a pittance, a fraction of what you are legally entitled to. The discovery was sickening, but it was also empowering. This wasn't just a crime of passion, it was a premeditated financial assault. It hardened Isabella's resolve, transforming her pain into cold, hard determination. She started attending every meeting, absorbing the complex financial jargon her mind once occupied with nursery designs, now grappling with asset allocation and international finance law. She was learning the language of her husband's world, not to be a part of it, but to dismantle it. But the most significant discovery came from a private investigator, a former MI6 agent named David Chen, who had been tasked with digging into Chloe Sterling's background. On the surface, Chloe was exactly what she appeared to be: an heiress to a modest fortune, a C-list socialite who had leveraged her looks into a moderately successful career as an Instagram influencer. But Chen was thorough. He looked past the curated photos of yachts and champagne and found something far more interesting. Chloe Sterling has a brother. Chen reported, his voice calm over the speakerphone. His name is Marcus Sterling. He's not an influencer, he's a hedge fund manager, a particularly ruthless one known for hostile takeovers. Annalise leaned forward. Go on. For the past 6 months, Chen continued, Marcus Sterling's fund, Sterling Capital, has been quietly, very quietly accumulating a significant position in Montgomery Industries. Not enough to trigger any SEC alarms, but enough to be significant. He's been using various smaller funds to mask the purchases. A silence fell over the room. Isabella looked at Annalise, whose sharp eyes were narrowed in concentration. And here's the twist, Chen said, a note of triumph in his voice. The bulk of this purchasing activity started about 3 weeks before Ethan Montgomery's vacation to the Maldives. And the funds to make these purchases, our preliminary tracing suggests a significant portion originated from an anonymous benefactor in the Cayman Islands. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening thud. My God, Isabella whispered, standing up and walking to the window. It wasn't just an affair. Annalise finished her thought. It was a corporate espionage operation, with sex. The vacation to the Maldives, the proposal, the public affair. It was all a charade. A brilliantly executed, diabolically cruel piece of theater designed to distract Ethan to cloud his judgment while Chloe's brother prepared for a corporate raid. Chloe wasn't just a mistress. She was a weapon. And Ethan, the master of the universe, the brilliant tycoon, had been played for a fool. And the money from the Caymans? Isabella said, her mind racing. It was Ethan's money, the money he was hiding from me. Precisely, Annalise confirmed. We believe Chloe somehow gained access to those offshore accounts. She fed the account numbers, the access codes, to her brother. Then she used the affair as the perfect cover. She didn't just steal his heart. She stole his capital and used it to fund an attack on his own company. The revelation was staggering. It recontextualized everything. Ethan wasn't just a cruel, cheating husband. He was a mark. A gullible, arrogant man so blinded by a pretty face and a new romance that he had failed to see the viper in his bed. His decision to abandon Isabella wasn't just an act of personal betrayal. It was an act of catastrophic business negligence. He had left the dinner table not just for a tryst, but to unknowingly participate in the orchestration of his own professional demise. Isabella felt a strange, dizzying mix of emotions. There was no satisfaction in knowing Ethan had been duped, only a profound sense of the waste and destruction. But beneath it all, a new, powerful idea began to form. Ethan's weakness, his arrogance, his catastrophic affair with Chloe. They had not only given her grounds for divorce, but they had also handed her the key to the entire kingdom. Annalise, Isabella said, turning away from the window, her eyes shining with a fierce, newfound light. The board of directors for Montgomery Industries. They don't know about this yet, do they? Annalise allowed herself a small, predatory smile. Not yet. But they're about to have a very, very bad day. The phoenix was rising. Isabella was no longer fighting for a settlement. She was fighting for control. She had the one thing that could save Montgomery Industries from the Sterling siblings' hostile takeover, the truth. And she was about to leverage it for everything it was worth. The abandoned wife was about to become the most powerful player in the game. The stage for the final act was not a courtroom, but the place where Ethan Montgomery derived his power, the 60th floor boardroom of Montgomery Industries. It was a cathedral of corporate might with a monolithic marble table and a panoramic view of the city that Ethan had once considered his kingdom. But today, he was not on his throne. He was seated at the far end of the table, looking diminished and pale, flanked by his stunned-looking corporate lawyers. At the head of the table sat Isabella. She had requested the meeting, an emergency session with the board of directors. They had gathered a collection of grim-faced, silver-haired men and women who controlled the company's destiny. their expressions a mixture of confusion and irritation. They thought they were there to discuss the PR fallout from Ethan's messy personal life. They had no idea they were about to witness a coup. Isabella was the picture of calm, controlled power. She wore a tailored navy blue dress that accentuated her pregnant form not as a sign of weakness, but as a symbol of the future. Annalise Reed sat to her right, a file folder placed neatly in front of her. To her left sat Julian Vance, one of the forensic accountants, his laptop open and ready. "Thank you all for coming," Isabella began, her voice steady and clear, resonating with an authority that silenced the room. "I know my presence here is unusual. You know me as Ethan's wife. You know me from the news as the woman he left behind. Today I am here as the single largest private shareholder in this company, aside from Ethan himself." This was true. Her prenuptial agreement, which Ethan had considered ironclad, had stipulated a significant, though non-voting block of shares in her name. It had been a gift, a symbol of their union. Now it was her weapon. A murmur went through the board. Ethan shifted in his seat, his eyes for the first time meeting hers from across the vast table. She saw shock in them, and for the first time a flicker of fear. He had expected her to be at home crying, not here at the head of his table. For the past several weeks, Isabella continued, her gaze sweeping across the powerful faces in the room. "My legal team has been conducting a thorough investigation into my husband's activities. We were preparing for a divorce. But what we found was not just infidelity. We uncovered a conspiracy to defraud this company." She nodded to Julian Vance. With a few clicks, the large screen at the end of the boardroom flickered to life. It displayed a complex chart, the one Annalise had shown her, detailing the flow of money from Montgomery Industries through Ethan's personal offshore accounts and into the hands of Sterling Capital. "As you can see," Annalise explained in her crisp, no-nonsense tone, "Mr. Montgomery has been careless. He allowed his mistress, Chloe Sterling, access to sensitive financial information she then passed to her brother Marcus Sterling, who has been using Mr. Montgomery's own money siphoned from marital assets to orchestrate a hostile takeover of this very company." The room erupted. Board members shot to their feet, shouting questions, their faces masks of disbelief and fury. Ethan looked like he had been struck by lightning. He stared at the screen, at the undeniable proof of his own folly, his face ashen. The name Sterling Capital was the final nail in his coffin. He knew what it meant. He looked from the screen to Isabella, a dawning horror in his eyes. He finally understood. This is an outrageous lie," he stammered, finding his voice. "She's a scorned wife trying to ruin me." "Is it Ethan?" Isabella asked, her voice cutting through the noise. She looked directly at him, her expression unreadable. "Did you not take a trip to the Maldives with Miss Sterling? Did you not propose to her? Did you not leave me your pregnant wife at a dinner table to fly off with her on a private jet? Your recklessness, your arrogance has put every single person in this room and the thousands of employees of this company at risk." The board fell silent, their angry eyes now fixed on Ethan. He was no longer their brilliant, infallible leader. He was the architect of their potential ruin. "Sterling Capital now controls nearly 19% of this company's voting stock," Annalise stated calmly. "They are poised to make their move. But we have something they don't. We have the proof of collusion. We have the evidence of wire fraud. We can tie this up in the SEC and the courts for years. But that would be a long, bloody, and public battle that would drag the company's stock through the mud." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "Or," she said, "there is another way." This was the moment. The culmination of all the pain, the strategy, the sleepless nights. "I am prepared to hand over all of our findings to this board," Isabella announced. "The evidence you need to neutralize Sterling Capital and protect this company. In return, I have two conditions." All eyes were on her. The air was thick with tension. "First," she said, "Ethan Montgomery will resign as CEO and from his seat on the board, effective immediately." Ethan slumped in his chair as if his strings had been cut. His lawyers whispered frantically to him, but he didn't seem to hear. He just stared at Isabella, his empire crumbling around him. "Second," She continued, her voice unwavering. His shares, his voting power will be placed into a trust. A trust that I will control as its sole trustee until my son, his son, comes of age. Checkmate. She wasn't just divorcing him. She was supplanting him. She was taking the power he had abused and placing it in her hands, not for revenge, but for the future for her child. The board members looked at each other. They were businessmen. They saw the logic. It was a clean, swift solution to a catastrophic problem. It was ruthless, but it was effective. The chairman of the board, an old family friend of the Montgomerys named Thomas Blackwood, looked at Ethan with pity, then at Isabella with a newfound respect. The board will need to vote, he said, his voice gravelly, but the outcome was already a foregone conclusion. As the board members began their hushed formal discussion, Isabella stood up. Her work here was done. She walked around the table, her path taking her directly past Ethan. He looked up at her, his face a wreck of confusion, despair, and a desperate pleading question. "Why?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. Isabella paused, looking down at the man who had been the center of her world, the man who had shattered it. She had expected to feel triumphant or vindicated or even hateful. Instead, she felt a strange, quiet emptiness. And then she delivered the final unexpected twist. The one detail that not even Annalise Reed knew. The one piece of the puzzle that was hers alone. "About a month before you left," she said, her voice so low only he could hear, "I had a scare. Some bleeding. I went to the doctor terrified I was losing the baby. They did an ultrasound. They did some tests." She looked him straight in the eye, letting him see the profound, unwavering truth of what she was about to say. "The baby is fine, Ethan. He's strong. But he's not yours." Ethan's eyes widened, his mind struggling to process the words. It was a lie. A beautiful, perfect, devastating lie. A lie born in the depths of her pain, a final secret revenge that no one would ever know but them. A lie that severed the very last tie that bound them together. He had tried to take everything from her. She was taking the one thing he could never reclaim, his legacy. His son. She saw the flicker of doubt war with his ego, and then the crushing realization that he would never know for sure. He had lost the right to know. Without another word, Isabella turned and walked out of the boardroom, leaving behind the ruins of her husband's life. She didn't look back. As the heavy doors closed behind her, she rested a hand on her stomach on the son that was, and always had been, entirely hers. She had walked into that room a betrayed wife. She was walking out as the quiet, undisputed queen of the Montgomery Empire. Her fall had been a spectacle, but her rise was a silent, powerful revolution. Isabella Montgomery's story is a powerful reminder that the deepest betrayals can forge the strongest warriors. She went from a billionaire's gilded accessory to the master of her own destiny, proving that a woman's strength isn't in the life she's given, but in the life she claims for herself. Her journey from public humiliation to quiet power is a testament to resilient strategy and the fierce protective love of a mother. What did you think of the final twist? Was it the ultimate revenge? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.